Hit subscribe to the DIY Writer to support your hardworking authors and also lessen your chances of ending up as a victim in their next book. Join me at the first annual Icarus Book Convention, May 8th and 9th. This conference has a great lineup of speakers, including little old me, talking about podcasts, vlogs, and other neat author stuff. Go to Icarus, IQARUS book, con, CON.com for more information. Hope to see you there. This is Jeff Bacon with the DIY Writer Podcast. Today we have Troy Young. And if you don't know about Troy Young, you really need to take a look at his Amazon. He's got a ton of books out there, including The Other, which we're going to start talking about right now. Troy, how you doing
Jeff,
today, man?
I'm well. I'm extremely well. Let's talk about The Other.
Let's talk about The Other, man. What about it?
Well, hey, let's talk about Cthulhu, Lovecraft, how this all came about. I'd never thought I would, first off, be a writer, let alone a horror writer. So horror was not necessarily my thing. I had been a fan of Lovecraft. I'd read his stuff. And I had just recently read Neil Gaiman's The Graveyard Book.
Okay.
It was the first book of Neil Gaiman's I ever read. And I was in the process of writing my first novel. I'd kind of finished it, didn't know what I was doing with it yet. It's not in the horror genre. It's a contemporary, humorous, coming-of-age story, but we'll talk about that in a little bit. So I did this little 4-page short story.
Okay.
Because I'd just been at a bar talking to some guy who was saying, people that I know, he worked in the comic book industry. He said, people I know that have published stuff, self-published stuff through Amazon, they did really well with these short serials. And I was like, okay, I never even thought of doing that. So I wrote this little 4-page short story, and I had no idea how self-publishing worked. I had no idea about the process. I didn't know what went into publishing it via Amazon. So I thought, I'll make my mistakes right now, right, with this little 4-page short story. And I published it, and I put it out there. And holy crap, like I had 400 sales of this thing. 99-cent short story, 4 pages.
Wow.
Called Shadow in the Night. And I went, well, this is easy. Right? So I'm out.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know why everybody's complaining about writing being so tough. I went out and I'm walking the dog one night. And most of my ideas come while I'm walking the dog, it seems. Because you can't do anything else and your mind wanders. And I remembered about this event from my childhood. I was about 6. And my parents are from Cape Breton Island down in Nova Scotia. And so we're down visiting Cape Breton. And there's only one radio station, right? CBC Radio. And as we're driving to my grandparents' place, there's this story that's on the radio. And they repeat it every 15 minutes. And it was about this unknown sea monster that was washed ashore on a beach. And I'm sitting in the back seat looking out the window, picturing Godzilla coming over the next hill to grab our car. Now, it turned out a couple days later, I remember I'm sitting in my grandparents' kitchen, and I hear on the CBC there that it ended up being something called a basking shark, which I knew nothing about at the time. Apparently, these are quite common, but this particular basking shark that got washed ashore was exceptionally large and overly decomposed, so they couldn't tell what it was at first. So this is the story that stuck with me, and I'm out walking around and going, okay, I'm going to write a story like that, but imagine if this was a real sea monster. Okay, it's not just a basking shark. It's something for real.
Okay.
And I suddenly remembered my Lovecraftian roots. I hadn't read it in years even, but, there's definitely a nautical theme to what he talks about with Cthulhu and tentacles and octopuses and, the deep ones and things of that nature. So I went, why not throw in some vague references to Lovecraft's world? And again, I thought this was going to be a one-off. I wrote a short story. It was about 12,000 words, and I published it. And again, holy crap, people loved it. And again, I'm like, okay, I had never thought about writing these horror stories. I'd never thought about writing short stories. I'd never even really thought about writing. And we'll get to why I started writing a little bit later. So I wrote that one, and then people feedback coming in going, well, I want to see more of these characters. Oh, there's a budding romance there. And I'm like, romance? Really? No, it's a sea monster. It's a sea monster. And just because it was a man and a woman doesn't mean that there's automatically romantic entanglements, but whatever. So
isn't that funny how people read into that kind of stuff and you're like, no, I didn't want it to be.
but then again, you give fan service, right? So
Right.
if you think there's romance, great, fine. There's going to be romance. In my, yes, dystopian horror story. So I then wrote a second one using one of the characters. And again, hadn't really thought much about it. Decided that there was this secret government organization out there that knows that this shit's going down. And because they'd been exposed to that sea monster, figured they only ever recruit people that have been exposed to this phenomena because they don't want to put anybody else in harm's way. So you were a marine biologist. You went up there. I've got a job for you. And he sends her up to Nunavut, to the middle of nowhere, past Alert, which is the most northern inhabitation on the planet. And she tracks down this lost tribe of people, and there's something trapped in the ice, so some big Cthulhu monster there. And I wrote that, and again, people were like, oh, I want to see more. Fair enough. So it was by the time I wrote the third story that I started to realize, okay, rather than just, nameless stories that are standalone on their own with only a vague tie to each other, I started to come up with the idea for a story arc.
Okay.
And some of the people that read the first Other, because the Other is the compilation of these short stories. So some people that read the first one say, well, I really liked the first couple stories because they were action adventure. And then it got weird. So they didn't like where the arc is going. And I'm like, yeah, but you got to understand, the first three were written standalone and the arc developed in the middle. And I think you really got to get into the second book of the Other before you start to appreciate where it's going, because they're like, I don't like some of the choices you made in those later stories. I said, well, that's because everything that's now happening in the later stories, as more gets revealed to our protagonists, all has meaning to this story. So I'd come up with this 18-story arc that's leading to this big, massive, final encounter against the hordes of evil. And I've gotten 16 of those 18 stories written now. So the first 6 are published in the Other book 1. The next 6 are published in the Other book 2, and the Other book 3 should be out this summer. But yeah, it's been a heck of a ride. So there was a little bit of romance thrown in at the end of book 1, if you call it romance, but yeah, so it's been a heck of a ride, and I've got great reviews of it. People seem to really like it.
How many books do you have out?
I have 6, all published in 2020.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So the Other, I started writing the Other in April of 2019 is when the first story went. And the first book of the Other was published in February of 2020, just before madness took over the world, right?
Sure.
So I was planning all sorts of things, like, oh, I'm gonna have a book launch party. I even know where it's gonna be, and all that went out the window. So at that point, I decided, well, it's time. Let's work on some other stuff, and I completed the second book, and that came out in October. And now the third book will come out this summer. But I also finished off a fantasy book I'd worked on. and I published two sci-fi short story, or not short stories, just two sci-fi novels that I wrote. The one of them I wrote in 12 days. It just popped out of my head. And it right now is actually in this independent sci-fi and fantasy book battle. There was 114 books that got submitted, and they knocked out the first 74, and I made it into the second round.
Okay.
And I found out that I was tied for one of the top spots in that second round. So they're going through the second round right now and narrowing it down to 10. So I'm really hoping that I make it as a finalist in the top 10. And that's my space Western called The Seeker of Solace, inspired very heavily by both The Mandalorian and the video game Red Dead Redemption.
Okay.
So I've mixed two of my loves together into that. So yeah, we were watching The Mandalorian, watching it with my family when it first came out, and I always liked the concept, right? Star Wars growing up was and the way Dave Filoni and Jon Favreau approached The Mandalorian, like really with Western tropes and a very kind of gunslinger-esque, but set in space. I loved it. So this kind of ruminated in the back of my mind for 6 months. And I did love the video game Red Dead Redemption, particularly the first one, where, you know, you've got this violent criminal who's kind of given a chance to redeem himself. And how does he redeem himself? Well, you got to clean up your mess. You got to get rid of your gang that you run with. And that was the genesis of The Seeker of Solace. It actually starts, he's in some jail in some tiny little village on some backwater planet, and they've drug him out to the gallows, and the rope is around his neck, and he's about to go, and a frontier marshal lands and says, give me a couple minutes. And he basically says, you got two choices. You can go back up there on that gallows, and this ends right now, or you come work for me and you hunt down this gang. Of course, he says, I'll hunt down the gang.
Right.
3 days sitting in a cell after being abandoned by them, he was already a little pissed off, but he'd already been saying, you know, is this really living? Like I'm just a kind of a jerk, right? Like,
Yeah.
There's nothing pleasant about who I am. I offer no value to anybody. Is this all I want my life to be? So that, coupled with being abandoned, he embraces it and he goes for it, and ends up going after the individual gang.
Kind of an anti-hero type thing.
Oh, he is.
Yeah,
definitely. It's an extreme anti-hero. Orlan Bazayev is the guy's name. And the series is actually called The Gunslinger's Emancipation, right? He's trying to free himself from this life.
Sure.
And all he wants to do is go to some decent planet that he's not allowed on, right, because of his background, but have his name cleared, go to a decent planet, get a little house, and have a little job, and just be a normal person for once in his life. So it's the struggles that he goes through. How do I become a decent person when I really don't know how to be a decent person?
Right.
And how do I marry the sheer brutality of what I have to do to bring this gang down? Because the frontier marshal says it's not dead or alive, it's dead.
Dead.
Right? They're too dangerous to try to capture and bring in. You just got to kill them and provide me with, proof that they're dead. So you can't blow them up in a space battle, right? You need that body. And so how does he go about finding these people, hunting them down? Because he doesn't know where they all scatter after every job, right? And then they'll meet up at a certain place, in a month's time. Well, he can't take them all on at once. He's got to find out where they all are individually. And he's like, okay, I think this person might be there. And then that person gives him a tidbit of information where those people are. And then it just, so he has to piece it together and interspersed with each one. So when the first person he's going against, I have a flashback chapter that details his interaction with that gang member when they were running as a gang, right? So you get introduced to the personality of the person that he has to hunt down. And some of them are just bad people that this guy, the main character, doesn't like. So killing them's easy. And other ones, it's like, they're actually not a bad person. And I actually kind of like them, but I still got to kill them.
Right.
So it's this internal struggle of this this gunslinger. So the second book is called The Denial of Deliverance. He thinks he's cleared, and of course, he's not. And that one is more like Magnificent Seven Samurai meets Mad Max, because him and the frontier marshal have to go and evade the law and find themselves on this planet, and everything goes to hell because their ships are gone. They can't get off the planet. They're trapped there, and they're basically brought into this internal war that's going on this planet. And yeah, it's pretty cool. And I got 2 more in that series that have to come out still.
You're busy.
I am, because I it seems like I'm constantly writing.
Well, how'd you get into it? What's that story?
Well, this story, okay. I actually have to thank Donald Trump a bit. One of the few times I'll thank him for anything. But I'm in Florida. My parents have a...
So he's making you great again.
He's making me great anyway, yeah. My parents have a winter home in Florida. And I've been going down there every year for the last 10 years. So I'm down in Florida. And like they live in South Central Florida or Southwest Florida, total sprawl area, right? There's nothing there. Except there's some nice beaches and the weather's nice, right? That's the only reason you go there.
Right.
But they'd just put in sidewalks. There'd never been sidewalks. They just put in sidewalks. So I thought, I'm going to go take advantage of the fact that there's sidewalks now. And I went for a walk. I was out there way longer than I thought I would be in the hot Florida sun with no hat, no water, no sunblock. And I think I came back delirious and dehydrated and a little out of my mind. But while I was walking, because I say my ideas come while I walk, I got this idea for this guy who lives in a trailer park. And he's out of work. The trailer park's a shithole. His trailer's a shithole. He lives with his mother who's got glaucoma, so she can't work. So she's all smoking her medical marijuana. And it's just, just this guy. But he's got a destiny. He's got a destiny. He just doesn't know what it is. Nor does he have the ambition to pursue it. So he's just kind of existing. But he knows there's more for him than that. And it was kind of, I was caught up in the whole hyper partisanship of everything that's going on. And I was like, you know what? The average person out there could give a shit about the Republicans or the Democrats. They just want to live, right? All this other crap that you're bringing into things, and both sides are complicit, right?
So both sides are shit. Let's just get that straight.
Both sides are shit. I'm not a fan of either one.
Yeah.
But and it was just living in that heavily charged atmosphere that was the Trump presidency that made me kind of depressed. That why is everybody like this? And it, like, again, both sides. Why are both sides like this?
Right.
And this is my character, Jimmie Mayfield. I got the last name Mayfield off of Baker Mayfield, who was just about to go #1 to the Cleveland Browns. Not that I'm a Cleveland Browns fan. I just like the name Mayfield. And if I hadn't been hearing about Baker Mayfield so much, I probably wouldn't have sit on it. So if anything, Baker Mayfield has helped me name my character. So I came up with this character, Jimmy, this guy who's just, I want to do something. I don't know what it is. And I'm sick to death of everybody and both sides. And the story just kind of formed over 3 days.
Yeah.
And it's going to be a 5-book arc, and you're not going to believe where he ends up. It starts out with him unemployed, sitting on his rusted patio, drinking a Diet Coke, smoking a cigarette, and eating Frosted Flakes. And where he goes from there over this 5-book arc, blow your mind. But it's all about real characters, his interactions with his friends, some that are equally as lost as him.
Mhm.
But it's all about, kind of this lost generation of youth where their life just feels like it's on pause. Right?
Mhm.
I'm just existing. How do I do more than exist? So it's got some depth to it, but also a lot of hilariousness, right? And it was originally going to be called Florida Man the Novel, but that's why my email says Florida Man the Novel. I realized with that comes all sorts of negative connotations, right? Florida Man comes with the hijinks, illegality, and just sheer madness. And I figured that
Either that or elderly, one of the two.
Yes. So I figured some readers would be turned off thinking, I don't want to read a novel about a guy like that.
Mm-hmm.
And other readers might have picked it up hoping that that's what it was going to be and find out it wasn't and went, oh, well, now I'm disappointed in that way. So naming it Florida Man the Novel would just piss off everybody. So it's now The Extraordinary Life, or Extraordinary. It's in brackets, extra, so you can apply it either way, right? Is he extraordinary, or is he just really, really ordinary? Life of Jimmie Mayfield. And, does he ever get out of this trailer? What does he do? Does he get a job? What happens to him? And yeah, it's been hard to get readers for that one, but the ones that have read it have been, oh my God, I love it. I actually got an unedited, very rough draft into one of the 5 major publishers, and it got it through a back channel, and it got as high as a VP there. And she read it and she was like, oh my God, this kid can write. Well, I'm 48 at the time, but this kid can write. And she compared Jimmy to Holden Caulfield from Catcher in the Rye. And I was like, oh my God. She still declined to publish it, but whatever. I'm like, it's great. It's brilliant. This is the kind of thing I would read, but it doesn't have mass market appeal, and I can't figure out how to make money off of it.
It's never going to make it in our market. Yeah.
Well, yeah, that's the funny thing with writing and with publishers. They all lament that they want something fresh and new, but nobody wants to take the risk on fresh and new.
Right.
Right. So give me some recycled young adult dystopian garbage novel, because I know I can sell those like hotcakes.
Right.
I've been reading a bunch of those lately to my daughter, and I'm like, wow. Everything I've learned in this process about what not to do in writing appears in these books. So yeah, I don't know how they've become so successful. I'm like, how did this get a 3-movie deal? Like this. And I look at their dystopian world, and I mean, for somebody like me who's read, Brave New World, 1984, I'm like, this is how you do a dystopian world, right? You got to trick people into thinking that they don't live in shit, right? That everybody else has got it way worse than you, to keep people mollified. Like, as the central government in a dystopian world, you don't keep pointing out to people, you live in garbage. We treat you like garbage, and look at how great we are up here. We're just going to keep rubbing your face in it. Right. It's like, that's just a recipe for everybody going, well, to hell with this. Right. Mm-hmm. So it's like just so poorly written dystopian world building. And I'm like, yet they're getting movie deals and multiple story arcs. So I don't know. I got to figure out a way to write a proper dystopian novel, but I probably would. And they would go, this is great, but it's not what we can market. So
everybody that I've talked to that has made it with a publisher,
Yep.
You know, it's tricky because, you know, it's what they have scheduled, what they have slots for, you know, I mean, they run a business quite simply, you know, and it's not really a creative market. You know, there's some big names that can walk in and say, okay, take this. And they're like, okay, yeah, you bet. You know, it's got your name on it. We'll sell it. And then anything else that's got a hint of risk to it, yeah, you know, probably not, you know.
Unless somebody else has just had a success with
Well,
a similar type of story, right? And now we're
yeah,
looking for people that write those types of stories. So it doesn't even have to be good. You're just writing. We can market that as similar to that one,
yep.
and people that read that will read yours. And I think that's what a lot of these have done, right? They just, so if you can find out what the next big thing is going to be and have a story written in that and get it out to the publishers at just the right time, and I don't think it has anything to do half the time with how good your
I've got
work
a
is.
friend who does that, and he buys all of the K-Lytics reports, and that's
Yep.
what he does. He writes to market.
Yep.
You know, whatever's okay. This looks like it's hopping up. Okay, I'll write 5 stories. You know, $5, and he throws it out. You know, timing and research, and that's what he does. And he's, you know, very successful at it.
Yeah, I know. I'm still playing around, right? I'm
Yeah.
still writing things that I'd want to read.
Right.
And apparently not everybody wants to read what I want to read.
Well, you know, there's something that just gets stuck in your head. You're like,
Yeah.
I gotta put this down. I've got to write this. And I don't know when you get over that. And I'm not
I
sure it's a
know.
good thing that you do get over it.
No, I know. So, and and this is why I'm writing in so many genres, right? I mean, I could focus on just the horror genre. It seems to be the one that's selling for me. And I could expand in that, but I mean, I don't just read and watch horror, right? I do like sci-fi. I do like fantasy. Jimmie Mayfield. I like that one.
Mm-hmm.
So again, that was The Extraordinary Life of Jimmie Mayfield. The Seeker of Solace and Denial of Deliverance are the 2 sci-fi books, and the others books 1 and 2. So we've covered off most of them now. I'm gonna.
The one thing I find interesting is that you're writing all these different genres, but you don't pick different pen names. You just throw it all out underneath Troy Young.
And you know why? Because when this finally hits, I want everybody to know it's me.
Yeah.
Yeah. The idea of pen names. I mean, I am thinking of doing a new series in this dreaded YA category, because I think I there's got to be a way that I can do it better.
If you do YA romance, do a pen name.
Oh, I'm not going to do romance.
Okay.
But yeah, I'm going to do a pen name for that. Although I do have a historical romance that I half wrote and I kind of abandoned halfway. And if I ever finish that and publish it, that'll be in a pen name too.
I started off with a pen name. I actually had a couple, and I killed them both because I was just sick and tired of dealing with it. And I made the decision against everybody else's advice that I'm just going to do it I'm going to republish under Jeff Bacon. And so that's just what I did.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, screw it. You can blame me for whatever. And oh my God, it's going to screw up your Amazon. I don't know how you could screw up my Amazon anymore.
Yeah.
I mean, I think Amazon does a real good job of it all by itself.
That's possibly true. I got to figure out how to make Amazon ads work. That's my problem. I've done okay with Facebook.
Have you done anything with Brian Cohen?
No, but I've been seeing his stuff more and more. And I thought, well, I've already signed up for Mark Dawson's Facebook ad. And I just got like 2 or 3 modules in, started to play around with his Facebook ads because I tried them in the past and nothing really good had happened. But this time, I just that little bit of knowledge that I got from him just in the first couple of them, and I've sold $1,000 in royalties the past 2 months. So I'm like, okay, that's great. Now I got to figure out how to do the Amazon ads. And I've been seeing the Brian Cohen one, but I thought it was another pay one. And I'm like, the only people that are making money off of me are cover designers, editors, and ad guys.
Right.
It ain't me.
So You know, he has that 5-day challenge that's free.
Yes, that's the one I just learned about, and I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, maybe that's what I need to do.
Yeah, I've moderated it, or not moderate. I've helped him with that a couple of, or once, I guess. And I was going to do it a second time, but I ran out of time. And the guys that run that, Brian Cohen and the people he has working for him, are just phenomenal as far as answering questions. You can ask any question you want, and they have just tons of knowledge that they will dump on you.
That's what I need, because every time I tried an Amazon ad, you know, I'd spend $30 to make 2,
Yeah.
and I'm like, this is not sustainable.
No, even
Um,
Mark Dawson's Amazon ads, he uses
Yeah.
Brian Cohen.
Oh, does he? Okay.
Yeah.
So I can get into that one, because once you're in the Mark Dawson stuff, you can do all his stuff.
Yep.
So I'll figure it out that way. That
I,
was
I
my
would honestly get just right into his ad challenge, or Brian Cohen's ad challenge thing, and just do that. I wouldn't
Okay.
mess around with, I mean, I'd look at Dawson stuff because, like I said, you'll see some videos in there from Brian Cohen, but that he crams 5 days into about 8 days, which is very interesting. And he does such a phenomenal job, and you can take it as many times as you want. So he offers it like once a quarter. Of course, at the end, you're going to get, if you'd like to join my ad school, and it's not horribly expensive, but I mean, it's another $600 out of your pocket or something like that.
Yeah, and I just was seeing on one of the author groups on Facebook, and they basically said the free one is phenomenal. The paid one, you've learned most of the stuff in the free one already, right? They didn't find that they learned enough from the pay one. They said just do the free one, and you'll be away to the races. So
I disagree with that.
some people did,
Yeah.
and I figure I don't know. So at the very least, I'm going to try that free one first and see if I can't make my Amazon ads start to work for me a bit.
See, the thing I like about Brian Cohen and his ad school is that he's like a mad scientist, and all of a sudden he'll come back with, "Oh, look what I figured out," and it'll be, sometimes it works for certain genres, sometimes it doesn't, but then all of a sudden he comes up with this golden nugget that you'll get probably 6-8 months ahead of everybody in that that free class that he does.
Yep.
And he, like I said, he keeps up on research, and when something stops working, or a utility that he recommends stops working, he right away is saying, "Hey, this isn't working, or this no longer works the way I said it does. Here's another one that does." And he does all that research for you, so it's kind of nice just to keep on top of things. But again, I mean, the author world, it's $200 here, $300 here, $400 here, and all of a sudden you've got, 10 grand stuck into education that it's like, oh shit, I could have published, how many books with that?
Like it seems right now, I'm about to, probably in April, will finally, for the first time in the 2 years I've been doing this, make money. Right? Like year one was a complete write-off. I paid some big developmental edits for the Jimmie Mayfield book, which was helped immensely. But it still hasn't been published anywhere, although it is up right now for a Stephen Leacock Award.
Oh, wow.
For humor. And I find out if I get longlisted to the top 10 in April. So fingers crossed on that. If I can get longlisted, then I might be able to use that as, some promotional for it. If I get shortlisted to the top 3, second and third place both come with a $3,000 monetary reward, and first place comes with a $15,000 monetary reward. Suddenly it'll pay for everything.
Go get some of that. Yeah.
I also suspect that if I finally get to that top 10 list, it'll be much easier for me to find an agent and a publisher for it.
Yeah.
They might actually start calling me, right? If that happens. At least the ones here in Toronto will. I had an agent look at it here in Toronto, and he liked it, but I made the mistake of, explaining where the whole 5-story book arc goes, and it scared him off because he's like, I can't sell all of that to a publisher. So, well, let's just focus on the first one. Forget that the others even exist. And he couldn't.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, so there's only one book. Nobody needs to know anything more. If it sells well, which I know it will, if somebody actually took the time to publish it and promote it, it would sell extremely well.
I have a real hard time even considering going to a publisher anymore with anything. I've got some books that are going to be coming out, and I just, with everything that I see other people going through, it's like, I'm not even sure why I'd want to mess with that. And then I look at, like Andy Peliquin or, somebody like that who just does it. And it's like, I mean, Granny has his own publishing company, but I mean, a lot of these self-published guys are doing a really good job without the cost of an agent or a publisher or anything like that.
Well, and one of my daughter's best friends, her mother is a, properly published author, award-winning New York Times bestseller, and she wrote her most recent novel. One of her novels just got turned into a movie, so she was spending time in Africa where they were filming it.
Yeah.
But she finished her next novel, went to the editor. The editor missed getting it back in a deadline by 2 days. And it meant that the publisher was like, okay, well, it's now pushed back 9 months.
Yep.
And she was pissed off at that, of course, right? Because she's like, I'd like to start getting paid now, not 9 months from now. But that kind of made me go, that would freak me out to know. I as much as I want somebody to have skin in the game, that my success, they're dependent upon my success too, which means they're going to work to help me become a success, is great. But then to think back and go, there's so much that suddenly is out of my control. Geez, I don't know.
Right.
And maybe, I don't know what it'd be like to work with a small publisher. That might be okay. But then again, hey, if you can get one of the top 5 or top 4, and they're willing to put some money behind you, they're probably going to make it back. So there's pros and cons to it. And it's just her experience there kind of made me go, wow. Because when I've got it done and I'm like, well, I'm going to wait, or, I'll just do it this weekend, right? Like that's my problem. Everybody talks about rapid release and writing 4 books and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, yeah, but when that first one is done and ready to go, I don't want to sit on it while I work on the next 2 or 3.
Yeah.
Although if I do the YA one, I'll do it I'll wait till all 3 are written and then bam, bam, bam. Then again, I haven't had a whole lot of luck with pre-orders, but then again, I'm not big enough a name yet, I don't think.
And I think it depends on your genre too. I mean, it seems to me that some people get, hundreds and hundreds of pre-orders. And then there's other people that have just awesome books that are, like urban fantasy, and they get 5.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it really depends on, what your niche market is, and how many fans you have, or at least how many people are looking in that, for that particular book.
Well, and I'll even look at some of my books, right? Like the first one sells extremely well. Page reads through the roof. 4.5 stars on Amazon. Pretty much all the reviews are solid, with the odd, there's always going to be somebody who doesn't like your stuff.
Right.
Solid reviews. Oh, I love this. Da 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 da. And then book 2 is half or less of what book 1 is. It's like, book 2 is right there, right? Like you just said, oh, it's great. You took the time to come on and rate it 5 stars. You took the time to write a little thing on it.
Yeah.
And buy the next one. and I don't know why that doesn't happen.
because they didn't see it, they didn't think about it, they didn't, they just, they read it. Oh, that's a great book, and then they move on to the next thing. It's, the attention deficit disorder of society.
Yeah, I know.
You know,
But you know what? There's nothing greater than, and it's hard to do it now because my page reads are so high. But my page reads were only like 10,000 a month. You would literally watch somebody pick up the first book in a series, and they would devour the 300 pages in a day.
mm-hmm.
And then you'd see the second book in the series, and then the next story, boom, boom. And you'd see, because I published the short stories individually before I compile them. So the first 4 of book 3 are available right now. So I would watch them go boom, 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 and literally in a 2 to 3 day period, read everything in the series. And you would track it because it was happening in order.
Right.
And that was kind of neat to see. Well, now, I mean, I've got too many people reading. Yeah, I'm complaining about too many page reads.
That's a horrible problem to have.
Yeah,
Sorry about that, man.
I know. And I mean, even my page reads are not phenomenal by comparison. I mean, I think I'll break 60,000 for the first time this month,
Mm-hmm.
which isn't bad over, really 2 books. Because the sci-fi and the fantasy, I was just looking at the page reads today, and quite honestly, their page reads on Kindle Unlimited do not justify keeping it in Kindle Unlimited. So
Yeah.
once the enrollment period is up for those, I'm taking those ones wide. I've tried going wide a couple times, but I mean, again, I half-assed it, and I probably didn't know what I was doing, and nor did I give it enough time.
Yeah.
And my books that were in Kindle Unlimited were doing fairly well. Like, I mean, 30% of my revenue is from Kindle Unlimited. So I thought, well, I'll put everything in there. Doesn't work for everything, right? So
Right.
I'm going to try the wide route with the 2 sci-fi books and my fantasy book, which we haven't talked about yet.
Well, let's get on that.
Yes. So my fantasy book, it's called Stone of Death.
Okay.
Do you love Tolkien, J.R.R. Martin, or sorry,
J.R. Martin?
George R.R. Martin, sorry, and Robert Jordan? Do you love those big?
I have a
fantasies?
slight problem with Martin, but everybody else I like.
Well, good. Hey, if you like Robert Jordan and Tolkien, and we'll worry about George R.R. Martin, you probably won't like this book then.
The only problem I have with him is that I was in a anthology that we called Winds of Winter, and we released it in 2018. And then he comes out a year later saying, my new book is called Winds of Winter. And it's like, you got to be shitting me. And so we get people that buy this anthology and then rate us with a 1-star because this isn't Martin's book. It's like, no shit.
Well, does it say George R.R. Martin?
It doesn't say it on anywhere. Yeah.
So why would you think that? Anyway.
Yeah.
So you have a personal beef against it.
I have a personal beef, but the neat thing about it is that Amazon, in all their infinite wisdom, did a bundle deal with our anthology and a couple of George's books. And it's like, you need to stop that because we're getting killed. So people, I'll just buy all these, It's like, wait a minute.
Wait a second. This isn't what I thought it was.
This isn't it. So I kind of get it. But anyway, go ahead.
Yeah. So, I mean, I like George R.R. Martin. Game of Thrones or Song of Ice and Fire was good. But it's epic, right? Like it's so many characters, so involved. I love Tolkien as well. Robert Jordan, and I actually have The Eye of the World sitting right there, which I started over a year ago, and I'm 200 pages in because, oh my God, I thought Tolkien was wordy. I mean, he literally spent 4 pages describing crossing a river.
Oh,
and wow. I'm like, oh, I can't do that. I just can't. I need to know. So kind of, and I know people love this type of big, epic fantasy. And I decided I want to write something slightly different.
Yeah.
Right. I want something down, dirty, quick, doesn't take itself seriously. Because another thing about fantasy writers is they take themselves and their stories way so seriously, right? Like everybody is this epic character. There's kings and queens and the world's greatest swords wielder and child of destiny and da da da. And I just want to write about 4 losers that kind of get hooked up together inadvertently and get thrust into a quest against their will, but they can't really stop it or they're going to die because people are going to kill them, right? They figure you've got information that I want, so we want it back. And even if we recover it, because you've had access to it, you're a danger. So they're like, we can't stop. We got to keep going forward. We got 2 different groups after us. We got a magic artifact that can destroy the world that we got to find. And even if we get through all that, if we beat these 2 guys and you overcome the challenges at the end, because again, we're just kind of yutzes. We don't know what we're doing. Even if we beat everybody and get this artifact, what the hell are we going to do with it? We can't destroy it. If we destroy it, the whole world gets destroyed. We can't hide it. It's been hidden for 7,000 years already, and it's finally been found. If we take it and try to hide it somewhere, it's only a matter of time before it gets found again, and the same problem exists. We got to figure a way to deal with it that doesn't destroy everything. What are we going to do? And that's the thrust of it. And I had a lot of fun writing it, and people that have read it have had a lot of fun with it. But my problem is the majority of the people that I know that have read it are not normally fantasy readers.
Yeah.
So maybe I'm out of touch because, again, if everybody's liking the George R.R. Martins and the Robert Jordan epics and big, bold people, strolling around and affecting countries and realms and blah, 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 then they're going to go, meh.
Yeah.
I want the epic swords fighter. I don't want, this idiot that would probably stab himself if he threw his sword, right? But I thought it made the characters real, and they, delusions of grandeur in some cases. And I intended 4 stories in that, each told from a point of view of the 4 main characters. So only one character, Cal, he's the idiot who thinks he's a hero, and is a farm boy and former mercenary that is just totally screwed up everything in his life, that gets caught up in this. So he's the only one with an internal monologue. Well, the next book was going to be somebody else and his internal monologue. So you're going to get Cal's impressions of the other 3.
Right.
And then the next book you get Mysterium's impression of the other 3. And then
that's cool though.
I think so. I like it.
I like that too.
Yeah, and there's one character that she seems like a little bit of a Mary Sue character at first. But then you realize later on, no. Like they're like, oh my God, she's so good at this. And she's like, I'm only good because those guys really suck. Right? like I look good next to them.
Yeah.
And they only look good next to you. Right? Like if it was me in there with properly trained, well-armored soldiers, I would have left you to die because I would not have done well. Yeah. Right? But for you and your limited experiences, yeah, I look like so that's it, right? At first they're being told, and she looks like, oh my God, she's this character that can do no wrong. And she quickly abuses them of that later on. Right? And they're like, oh, can you teach me how to wield a sword? They're like, do you see me wielding a sword? If I knew how to use a sword, I would carry a sword. Then I could teach you, but I can't. So, right? Like, and that's the thing. It's these characters who don't even trust one another. They're lying to each other. There's way more going on that, there's in the epilogue after everything is done. You finally learn as the reader what's been going on and what's been kept. And you're like, son of a bitch, right? Like I said, the few people I had that I know that I personally gave the book to read it, they were like, holy shit. I was so pissed off when I learned that. And I'm like, oh, well, that's good then. But literally, when they finally figure out what to deal with this magic artifact, somebody just kind of throws it out there, and they're like, no. Well,
Maybe.
sometimes the simplest solution is the appropriate one, and they actually deal with it. And one of the characters, they do it, and he stands there and he goes, well, that was kind of anticlimactic, wasn't it? Like, you would have thought after everything we've gone through to get to this point, there'd be a bigger no.
See, and I love that when I read books that the character actually says, well, that was nothing. Okay. Because it kind of builds up, then all of a sudden it's like, oh, well.
Well,
Gosh.
and like I said, would you read this type of fantasy exclusively? No. But I mean, sometimes with this big, epic, heavy duty fantasy, you need a little bit of a palate cleanser.
Exactly.
So this is just a fun little romp. It's a typical quest type movie. And I even started it out in a tavern. And I sent it to one publisher, and they went, oh, there's nothing unique about this. You started it out in a tavern like everybody else. I said, you know what? You didn't read past the first chapter, because clearly that was kind of a tongue-in-cheek way of doing it. It was an homage to the typical role-playing scenario. How do I get 4 diverse characters together,
right,
that don't know each other? And so I did that. And then from that point on, everything goes out the window. I mean, like, that was the only trope I used. And only because, years and years of role-playing games kind of got me into that. And I thought, well, and then you find out that, some of the characters were meant to be there, and maybe this wasn't his chance of meeting as we thought it was, except for, idiot Cal, who just wandered into this and got roped in because, they were afraid if they let him go wandering off on his own, he was just going to get killed. So, but all the way along, you keep thinking, we start to learn, well, I almost killed him myself here. I almost killed him there. I was going to leave him there. But for whatever reason, it's just not, we ended up keeping him. And he ends up being kept simply because he is completely just, They figure that this artifact plays on people's ambitions. If we look at the history, it's always been the ambitious that it takes charge of and corrupts what they want to do to turn it to its evil. And he is so lacking in ambition, I figured he would be immune. And they're like, well, what are you getting from it? Oh yes, it's making me promises of this, and it's making me promises of that. Cal, he's like, nah, nothing. Yeah. See, that's why you're here.
See, it kind of reminds me of camping with friends.
Yeah.
You never want to be the slowest friend camping out in the wilderness.
Exactly.
Just in case you run into a bear.
That's the one the bear will get. I don't have to. I don't have to outrun the bear. I just have to outrun you.
Right.
I always make sure that I bring slow people with me.
Yep.
Yeah. So that was it. So again, it was tough to market it, and I had a really bad cover at first. Everybody told me it looked like a YA dystopian romance, and I was like, oh no. And that was my fault. Like, I designed the cover. That was my fault. So I changed the cover, and I threw up on a fantasy author's critique site. I said, I need a better blurb. And so many people joined in and gave me really good ideas. And I rewrote the blurb, changed the cover, and I went from selling, 1 a month to 12 a month. Yeah. That's an increase. It's still only 12 a month, but I think it would be fun. But, when I'm only selling 12 a month, do I really want to spend the time to write the second one? But if I write the second one, I might sell more than 12, right?
The only thing that I can say, and this is just my personal feeling on it, is that an incomplete project looks worse than having a complete project out there.
Yeah, I know, but I could always unpublish it if it came to that.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, as you progress and as you get more popular, people are going to read your other stuff. I don't know. I mean,
Well, and that's it. So some of the people that read my horror went and read this book,
right.
strictly because, hey, I like what this guy writes. I'm going to check this out. And they liked it too. So,
Right.
I mean, if you look at it, I mean, it doesn't have a whole lot of ratings, either on Goodreads or Amazon, but it's still coming in at 4.5 out of 5. Any of the reviews have been positive.
Yeah.
Any of the feedback I've gotten from people that took the time to read it are like, that was really good. I liked it. It was fun. It was light. It's just, how do you connect? So that's the biggest thing with us as a self-published author, right? Is finding your tribe that wants to read your stuff,
Right.
and the marketing aspect of it. And I think, as every beginning author out there, that's the part of the business they don't realize or don't think about. They think it's a matter of just sitting down and writing a book. That's the easy part. Right? Writing the book is the easiest part of it. Editing, oh my God. Right? And I unfortunately do most of my own self-editing. I know everybody says, don't get an editor, da 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 da. Again, I can't imagine being, between a cover and an editor, $600-700 in the hole before you hit publish. I mean, some of my books would earn that back in a month or two. Others, they've been out 6 months and they're nowhere near that. So I'm like, how do I rationalize that?
Right.
I've gotten better with my covers. And some of my covers have been professionally designed, and then some of them haven't been. And quite honestly, I don't see that much difference in the sales, partially because I think I've gotten better at figuring out how to do it. But the self-editing process, I use both the Grammarly Pro and Pro Writing Aid.
Okay.
And now I have Pro Writing Aid running live while I'm writing, and I am fixing errors on the fly. And I know some people go, oh my God, how do you do that? I can't do that. I got to get it out as quick as possible. I'm like, yeah, but it's challenging me to think about what I'm writing. And it's challenging me. Is there a better way to say this? Is there a better word to use right now? And I find that prompt there has actually made me a better writer.
I think there's something to be said about, as you're writing, if you just, puke it out on the page, I mean, that's just purely creative and you're just writing stuff. And when you're using something like Pro Writing Aid or whatever, and it pops up and says, ooh, that's a passive voice, try and do something with action in it. Like, oh, shoot, because you can have, 116 passive voice sentences in a row. And all of a sudden, you go back through it and it's like, oh my God, what was I thinking? And then have to rewrite the whole damn paragraph.
Exactly. So I find that that's been challenging me to anticipate
Right.
that prompt may come up, and I don't want it to come up. So it's made me a better writer, I think, having that constant influence. Now, even when I'm done, I go and I'll run it through the various programs. And I love it when Grammarly says, you should do this, and you change it, and instantly Pro Writing Aid goes, no, do this. And they want to change it back to the way it was. And you're like,
yeah,
it's perfect.
The other thing I find is that they can also make your dialogue become very mechanical.
Yeah, that's the thing. You've got to be careful that you're not a slave to it, because I find that especially Grammarly wants to make everything as simplified as possible. And a lot of times they're saying, simplify it, use this word. And I'm like, no, because I chose that word for a reason, because it does have a different connotation to it. It does conjure a different feeling than the simplified word that you're telling me to do. And that was one of the struggles I had when I was self-editing at the beginning. I wanted to accept everything these things were telling me. And sometimes I was just like, oh, this is terrible.
Right.
So now I've actually gone back recently to some of my stuff that I'd published earlier. And I'm just reading it over now, or I'll run it through one of these programs just for fun. And I'm like, oh my God, I can't believe that I wrote that. I can't believe that I was willing to publish that like that. I can't believe people bought it and gave it 5 stars like that. So I think I can see my own progress, right, and how this has gone. And I think by forcing myself to be my own editor, it's making me a better writer. Yes, it's ideal to have a second set of eyes on things. I have a friend that'll read my stuff. My wife will read my stuff, and my parents will read my stuff too. And they're just reading it to say, does it make sense to me? Right. I don't, as long as it makes sense to them, then I know it's going to make sense to the general public. But I actually find that I do a pretty good job at that. Now, some people plot out everything, right? And I a little bit of a pantser. I tend to know where I have to get to, but I don't know how I'm going to get there.
The journey.
Right? Yeah. And sometimes when I'll sit down to write, and I used to, when I write a chapter book, and I don't write every day. In fact, it's probably been a week or more since I wrote last, and I need to get to something. I've just got, everything is done right now. So it's like, okay, what's the next project? And I've got like 4 of them, and I don't know which one I want to do. And that's part of the problem. So I've decided to do nothing and play video games instead. But
very productive.
It's not. But actually sometimes it is, because again, one of those times I like to ruminate about what I'm going to write. So when I'm writing a chapter book, I will sometimes take a day or two in between bouts of writing. But I'm not a kind of person that writes 500 words a day. I'll sit down and I will bang out the chapter in one sitting. And that chapter may be 3,000 words. That chapter may be 6,000 words. But I will write until that chapter is done.
See, I write shorter chapters than that.
Yeah, no. So my books will probably be about 14 to 20 chapters between. Some chapters will be like 1,700 words. Yeah. And I vary them all the time, right? So you might get like 3 chapters in a row that are 1,500, 1,700, 1,200, and then 6,000. And it really just depends on, I approach it from the perspective of each chapter should almost be a short story in and of itself. Right? And I do a lot of short story writing lately. So not only is the other all short stories, and they're anywhere from 8 to 10,000 words, very rare, upwards of 20,000. Most often they're in around 12 and 14. But I just started to write this sword and sorcery series, and it's set in the same world as the Stone of Death. But it's a short story series following this main character, Binishawabe. She's a former slave, and she is living in this place called Vagabond Town, which is an underground city under this other city, where kind of all the riffraff are forced to go.
Oh, so it's Denver.
Okay. or you know, the underbelly of Chicago, right?
Yeah.
The underneath the all the
underneath
elevated
the L.
streets. Yeah. So she's there, and it's telling her story, and it's how she's trying to survive and integrate. And the series is called The Queen of Vagabond Town. So the implication is she's going to become a big deal. But that has been written as a series of short stories, 4 to 10,000 words. And somebody could look at it and say, boy, you just wrote 5 chapters of a bigger book as opposed to 5 short stories, because I think that to me is the best way to approach a chapter. But the difference between writing it as a chapter and writing it as a short story, the short story has to set the tone and sometimes fill you in on the previous short stories. But I don't have to when it's a chapter, because I know you just read the chapter previous. So I don't have to tell you, unlike Dan Brown, what just happened. I mean, I like the Dan Brown books. You know what? They're fun, they're quick reads, and they're engrossing.
Yes.
But each chapter is like 4 pages long, and the first 2 pages to retell you what you just read. So I guess it bangs it into your head because you're reading everything twice.
Yeah.
And you know what? More power to him. He figured out a winning formula on how to do it. And I have literally been reading a Dan Brown book in bed and realized it's 4 a.m. because I'm like, I just one more chapter, right? It's 4 pages, whatever.
Yeah.
But they every chapter is a teaser to the next one. And then you start the next one and it rehashes everything, and then it teases you again. And you're like, and you just can't stop.
No.
So, I mean, his stuff is kind of fluff. I'll admit that. His overall story arc, if you were to look at it through a critical lens, you're like, well, this is garbage. But he writes it in such an engaging way that if you don't take it seriously, like that's the problem with some people. They see what Dan Brown has written and they think that, oh, that might actually be the way it is. It's like, no, it's fiction, guys. It's not groundbreaking stuff. He's not really figured out, that Jesus Christ is buried in Scotland and whatever, right? Like that didn't happen. It's pure flights of fancy. Doesn't help that in his promo tours he pretends like it's real.
Right.
I think that's what gets people going. But anyway, yeah. So I think you have to approach each chapter as almost its own little tiny story, with a definite beginning and an end. So often when I sit down to write, I know the beginning, I know the end. I might know a couple touch points along the way. And there are times I will get to the end of the chapter and go, well, shit, I didn't see that happening. Right. But I also think it's the better you know your characters, the more ingrained you are in who they are and how they're going to react. This is when they can surprise you a bit, because they're no longer talking in your voice. They're talking in their own voice. And if you're looking at it abstractly from your own point of view, you see things progressing a certain way. But once you get into the mindset of the character, it can go and progress in a completely different way than you intended, as long as, you're getting to those ultimate goal. So with my chapter books, I will tend to plot out, what the chapter is and what the main point of coming out of that chapter will be. And I'll do that in advance, right? Like I'll say, this is the whole story. It's going to be 25 chapters long. Boom, 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 boom. This is the progress.
Cool.
And that's it. It'll be a 1-pager that I keep beside me. And I usually end up following that. There's sometimes I'll take out a chapter, or I might add 1 or 2 in between to act as a flow. But I usually end up very close to that. And it's because I do approach them all as individual stories. And I think my character development has greatly benefited from years of role-playing games, right? Where you're trying to create a new character that you're playing, and you've got to get into their mindset. And unless you've got to avoid making every character that you've ever played just be a carbon copy of one another.
Mm-hmm.
So because of that, and we're talking now, God, 37 years of experience playing these things. I think I've gotten very good at developing a character, developing their own voice, their own motivations, and understanding where they want to go and what they want to do.
It's very cool the way role-playing games seem to affect, or not affect, inspire a lot of authors. And I've talked about that quite a bit. The one thing I'll tell you is that we're running over an hour.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Is that good or bad?
Well, I try and keep them at about an hour, so we need to wrap things up here, bud.
Fair enough.
Fair enough. You got anything else you want to tell your readers?
Yeah, buy my stuff.
Buy my stuff. That's a very good message.
Just go buy my stuff. But no, whether you like science fiction, fantasy, horror, or contemporary humor, I've got something available and everything. Go to my Amazon page. You can find all the stuff there. You can follow me on Facebook, Troy Young Author, or The Other Lovecraft. Not because I'm the other Lovecraft, but because it's the other and it's in the Lovecraft universe. It was after I named the page, I was like, oh, people are going to think I'm kind of full of myself that, hey, I'm the other Lovecraft. No, I'm not. No, I'm not. The story is called The Other. So you can follow me on either of those, or Twitter at Florida Novel, although I don't tweet much, or Instagram at Troy Young 1971. Again, I don't put much up on Instagram. Facebook is probably the way you're going to be able to integrate me, or visit my website, FloridaManTheNovel.com, which has become an author website as opposed to just Florida Man. Again, I made a lot of mistakes at the beginning. And I could afford to go out and get a new URL and just make it Troy Young Author. But I think by saying Florida Man the Novel, it always goes, how did you come up with that name? Well, let me tell you.
It's a story.
It's a story.
Very cool. Troy, I appreciate you taking time out of your day to speak with me today.
Thank you.
And if you guys didn't catch where you can catch up with Troy, I'll put those links in the show notes, and they'll be listed below someplace, depending on what you look at. But with that, I'm going to say good day. This is the end of the program. Thanks a lot for listening. This is Jeff with the DIY Writer telling you to keep your chin up, and things are going to get better. Have a good day.
Please hit the subscribe button. I get a bonus for every subscriber, and I only need 1,506 more to become a full-time paid employee. Help me, please.